In the sweltering heat of a Phoenix auto repair shop, Diego Morales was elbow-deep in a transmission rebuild when 8-year-old Tyler Bennett rolled his wheelchair through the open bay door, tears streaming down his freckled face and his left sleeve pinned up where his arm should have been. What Diego did next, with nothing but spare car parts, late-night determination, and a heart bigger than his bank account, would not only change this little boy's life forever, but catch the attention of defense contractors who would soon be knocking on his door with offers that could transform everything. The question is, what happens when a man who fixes broken cars for a living discovers he has the power to fix broken dreams, and the military-industrial complex wants to own that power? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Cactus Road as Diego Morales arrived at Precision Auto Repair at exactly 6:30 a.m., the same time he'd been arriving for the past 7 years. The shop sat on the outskirts of Phoenix in a neighborhood where hope came in small packages and dreams were often deferred by the harsh realities of making ends meet. Diego's weathered hands, stained permanently with motor oil and marked by countless small cuts from sharp metal edges, unlocked the heavy steel door that separated his sanctuary from the outside world. At 36, Diego had the kind of face that told stories without words. Deep lines around his brown eyes spoke of long nights spent under car hoods, while calloused fingers revealed a man who understood that honest work meant getting your hands dirty. His black hair was beginning to show silver at the temples, a premature aging that came from shouldering responsibilities that would have broken lesser men. Yet despite the weariness that sometimes settled in his shoulders, there was something unbreakable in Diego's spirit, a stubborn optimism that refused to die, even when life delivered its harshest blows. The auto shop was a testament to Diego's resourcefulness and ingenuity. Every tool had been carefully selected or creatively modified to serve multiple purposes. Spare parts were organized with military precision in hand-labeled bins that Diego had crafted from old coffee cans and cardboard boxes. The workspace itself was immaculate despite the nature of automotive repair, because Diego understood that chaos in your environment led to chaos in your work, and he couldn't afford mistakes when customers trusted him with their most valuable possessions. Diego's reputation in the neighborhood was built on two fundamental principles. He never charged more than people could afford, and he never left a job half-finished. These weren't business strategies calculated to maximize profit, but moral imperatives that governed how he moved through the world. Mrs. Chen brought her ancient Honda here because Diego would explain exactly what was wrong and what it would cost to fix, never trying to upsell unnecessary repairs. Miguel Santos trusted Diego with his work truck because he knew the mechanic understood that transportation wasn't just convenience for a construction worker, it was survival. The morning routine unfolded with practiced efficiency. Diego fired up the air compressor, checked the oil levels in his pneumatic tools, and reviewed the work orders that would fill his day. An alternator replacement on a Ford pickup that belonged to a single mother who worked 2 jobs. A brake job on an elderly man's sedan that needed to last until his Social Security check arrived. A mysterious engine knock in a teenager's first car that probably needed more love than the family budget could accommodate. Each vehicle represented not just mechanical problems to be solved, but real people depending on Diego's skill to keep their lives moving forward. The first customer arrived at 7:15, just as Diego was sliding under the Ford to assess the alternator situation. Through the open bay doors he abhors, could hear the familiar sounds of the neighborhood waking up, children walking to school, adults heading to jobs that paid just enough to cover rent and groceries, the distant hum of traffic on the interstate that connected this working-class enclave to the more prosperous parts of Phoenix. It was a soundtrack Diego had grown to love, the rhythm of ordinary people doing extraordinary things just to make it through another day. Diego's own story was woven into the fabric of this community in ways that ran deeper than business relationships. He'd grown up 3 blocks away in a house that his grandmother had purchased with savings accumulated from decades of cleaning office buildings downtown. The neighborhood had watched him graduate high school, serve 4 years in the Army as a vehicle mechanic, and return home with skills that he immediately put to use, helping anyone who needed their car fixed. When old Mr. Peterson had been forced to close his auto shop due to failing health, Diego had scraped together every dollar he could borrow to take over the lease and keep the neighborhood's only affordable repair option alive. The work itself was more than just a job for Diego. It was a form of meditation that connected him to something larger than himself. When his hands moved across an engine, diagnosing problems through sound and vibration, he felt the same sense of purpose that had driven him to excel during his military service. There was poetry in understanding how thousands of individual components worked together to create motion, and profound satisfaction in restoring that harmony when it was disrupted. Each successful repair was a small victory against entropy, proof that broken things could be made whole again with enough patience and skill. But Diego's true passion revealed itself in the hours after the shop officially closed, when he would remain behind to work on projects that had nothing to do with automotive repair. In the back corner of the shop, hidden behind a makeshift curtain constructed from old tarps, Diego had created a workshop within a workshop. Here, surrounded by circuit boards salvaged from discarded electronics, servo motors pulled from broken appliances, and programming manuals checked out from the public library, he pursued the hobby that had captivated him since his military days: robotics. The Army had first introduced Diego to the intersection of mechanical engineering and computer programming when he'd been selected for additional training on autonomous vehicle systems. What had started as job-required education quickly became a personal obsession, as Diego discovered he had an intuitive understanding of how mechanical systems could be controlled through software. During his off-duty hours on base, he'd built small robots from spare parts, teaching himself programming languages and electronics principles that weren't covered in his formal training. After returning to civilian life, Diego had continued this education through online courses, library books, and the kind of trial-and-error experimentation that turned his small workshop into a laboratory for mechanical innovation. He'd built robots that could sort screws by size, automated systems that could organize his tool inventory, and even a small drone that helped him inspect hard-to-reach areas under vehicles. None of these projects had any commercial value, but they represented Diego's way of staying connected to the cutting-edge technology that had fascinated him during his military service. The neighborhood kids had discovered Diego's secret workshop about 2 years earlier when 10-year-old Maria Santos had been helping her father drop off his truck for repair. While the adults discussed transmission problems, Maria had wandered toward the back of the shop and discovered the curtained area where Diego's robots whirred and blinked with LED lights. Her excited squeals had drawn other children, and soon Diego found himself with an unofficial after-school program where local kids would gather to watch him work on his mechanical creations. These impromptu lessons, preparing and narrating this story, took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Had become one of the highlights of Diego's week. The children's enthusiasm reminded him why he loved working with his hands, and their questions pushed him to explain complex concepts in simple terms that deepened his own understanding. Maria wanted to know how the robot knew which screws were which size. Tommy asked why the drone could fly when it was heavier than air. Lisa wondered if robots could think like people. Their curiosity was infectious, transforming Diego's solitary hobby into a community activity that enriched everyone involved. It was during one of these informal workshops that Diego first met Tyler Bennett, though the circumstances of that meeting would prove to be unlike any of the others. Tyler's mother, Jennifer, had brought their family's minivan to the shop for a repair that her previous mechanic had quoted at twice what she could afford. Diego had taken one look at the stress lines around her eyes and the way she unconsciously reached for Tyler's hand when discussing money, and he'd known immediately that he would find a way to fix the van regardless of her ability to pay the full amount up front. Tyler himself had been unusually quiet during that first visit, staying close to his mother's side while Diego explained the necessary repairs. Most kids were drawn immediately to the tools and machinery that filled the shop, asking endless questions about how things worked and whether they could help. But Tyler hung back, his right hand buried deep in his pocket, his eyes taking in everything but his mouth staying firmly closed. Diego had noticed the pinned sleeve where Tyler's left arm should have been, but he'd also noticed something else: the way the boy's eyes lit up when they fell on a small servo motor that Diego had left on his workbench. That servo motor had been part of a larger project Diego was building, a robotic arm designed to help him hold parts steady while he worked alone under car hoods. The device was crude compared to industrial robotics, built entirely from salvaged components, and controlled by a simple microcontroller that Diego had programmed himself. But to Tyler, That mechanical arm represented something magical, proof that artificial limbs were possible, that technology could restore what biology had taken away. Tyler's story, as Diego would learn over subsequent visits, was one of resilience in the face of circumstances that would have defeated many adults. He'd been born with a congenital limb difference that left him without a left arm below the elbow. The condition wasn't uncommon, affecting roughly 1 in every 2,000 births, but the solutions available to families like the Bennetts were limited by both medical insurance restrictions and the astronomical costs of prosthetic devices. Jennifer Bennett worked as a night shift nurse at Phoenix General Hospital, a job that provided decent healthcare benefits but left her exhausted during the day when Tyler needed help with basic tasks that required 2 hands. Tyler's father had left when the boy was 3 years old, unable to cope with the additional challenges that came with raising a child with special needs. Since then, Jennifer had been Tyler's sole provider, advocate, and emotional support system, roles that she juggled with the determination of someone who had no choice but to succeed. The prosthetic options covered by their insurance were basic mechanical devices that provided minimal functionality and required constant adjustment as Tyler grew. More advanced prosthetics with electronic controls and individual finger movement cost upward of $50,000, amounts that might as well have been $1 million for a single mother working night shifts to pay rent and groceries. Tyler had tried several different prosthetic devices over the years, but each had proved more frustrating than helpful, leaving him to develop remarkable adaptability in managing daily tasks with his single hand. At school, Tyler faced the dual challenges of physical limitations and social isolation that often accompanied visible differences. While his teachers were supportive and his classmates weren't intentionally cruel, the 8-year-old found himself unable to participate fully in activities that other children took for granted. Art projects that required cutting and gluing, playground equipment designed for two-handed use, even simple tasks like tying shoes became sources of frustration that reminded Tyler daily of what he couldn't do, rather than celebrating what he could accomplish. Despite these challenges, Tyler possessed an intellect that impressed everyone who took the time to engage with him seriously. His questions about how things worked weren't just curious chatter, but demonstrated a genuine interest in understanding the mechanical principles that governed the world around him. He could explain in remarkable detail how a bicycle chain transferred power from pedals to wheels, or why airplanes could fly despite being heavier than air. Tyler's mind was constantly analyzing, categorizing, and trying to improve the systems he observed, traits that would prove crucial in the events that were about to unfold. It was on a particularly hot Tuesday afternoon in late September when Tyler's world collided with Diego's in a way that would change both of their lives forever. Tyler had accompanied his mother to the auto shop for a routine oil change on their minivan, a service that Diego provided at cost because he understood the importance of preventative maintenance for families who couldn't afford major repairs. While Jennifer discussed the vehicle's recent performance with Diego, Tyler had wandered toward the back of the shop where the mechanic's robotic projects were displayed on a workbench. The specific device that captured Tyler's attention was Diego's latest creation, an articulated mechanical arm controlled by a simple joystick interface. Diego had built the device to help him hold heavy parts while working alone, but its resemblance to a human arm was unmistakable. The mechanical joints moved with smooth precision. The gripping mechanism could delicately handle small objects or firmly grasp larger ones, and the entire assembly was controlled through intuitive joystick movements that made operation feel natural and responsive. Tyler stood transfixed before the workbench, his eyes tracking every movement as Diego demonstrated the robotic arm's capabilities. When the mechanical fingers picked up a small screw and placed it precisely into a predetermined location, Tyler's breath caught in his throat. Here was proof that artificial limbs could be more than crude mechanical hooks or cosmetic prosthetics that fooled no one. Here was technology that could restore not just the appearance of wholeness but actual functional capability. "How does it work?" Tyler asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as he reached out tentatively to touch the smooth metal surface of the robotic arm. Diego looked down at the boy, seeing something in Tyler's expression that went beyond casual curiosity. This wasn't the excited interest that other children showed in his mechanical projects. This was the desperate hope of someone who saw personal salvation in a collection of motors and circuits. Diego knelt down to Tyler's eye level, suddenly understanding the profound significance of this moment. "It's actually pretty simple," Diego said gently, activating the joystick to make the robotic fingers wave at Tyler. These motors here control each joint, just like the muscles in your arm control your real fingers. The computer brain tells each motor exactly how much to move and when, based on how I move this joystick. Want to try controlling it? Tyler's eyes widened with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. The idea that he could actually operate this mechanical marvel seemed too good to be true, but Diego's encouraging smile suggested that the offer was genuine. With his right hand trembling slightly with anticipation, Tyler grasped the joystick and experimentally moved it forward. The robotic arm responded immediately, extending smoothly toward a small wrench that lay on the workbench. Now, squeeze the trigger to close the fingers, Diego instructed, his voice filled with the patience of someone who understood that this moment was about more than just demonstrating a mechanical device. Tyler squeezed the trigger and watched in amazement as the robotic fingers closed around the wrench with perfect precision. The mechanical hand lifted the tool from the workbench and held it steady, responding to Tyler's joystick movements with smooth, natural motion. For the first time in his 8 years of life, Tyler was controlling a second hand, experiencing the sensation of bilateral manipulation that he had never known was possible. "This is incredible," Tyler breathed, moving the robotic arm through a series of simple motions while the mechanical hand maintained its grip on the wrench. Could something like this work as a real prosthetic? Could someone actually wear something like this? Diego felt his chest tighten as he recognized the profound hope in Tyler's question. The boy wasn't asking about theoretical possibilities. He was asking about his own future, about whether technology could provide him with capabilities that biology had denied. Diego's engineering mind immediately began calculating the modifications that would be necessary to convert his workshop project into a functional prosthetic device, while his heart understood that he was being presented with an opportunity to change a child's life in ways that went far beyond mechanical assistance. "I think it could work," Diego said slowly, choosing his words carefully because he understood the weight that Tyler would give to every syllable. "It would need to be smaller, lighter, and designed to attach securely to your arm. The control system would need to be different too, probably using muscle signals from your residual limb instead of a joystick, but the basic technology is definitely there." Tyler's face lit up with an expression of pure joy that transformed his entire demeanor. The quiet, reserved child who had entered the shop an hour earlier was suddenly animated with excitement, his words tumbling over each other as he described all the things he would be able to do with a functional prosthetic arm. He could tie his shoes without asking for help. He could ride a bicycle with proper steering control. He could participate in art projects at school without needing special accommodations. The list went on, each item representing a small piece of independence that Tyler had never dared to hope for. Jennifer Bennett appeared at Diego's shoulder, just as Tyler was explaining how a robotic prosthetic could help him play catch with the other kids at school. She had been watching from across the shop as her son interacted with the mechanic's creation, and the transformation in Tyler's demeanor was impossible to miss. For the first time in months, her boy was talking with unbridled enthusiasm about future possibilities rather than current limitations. "Tyler seems pretty excited about your robot," Jennifer said, though her voice carried the cautious tone of a mother who had learned not to let hope outrun reality. "He's got good instincts about how the technology works," Diego replied, still watching Tyler manipulate the robotic arm with increasing confidence. "And he's right that something like this could be adapted into a functional prosthetic. The engineering challenges aren't insurmountable." Jennifer felt her heart skip a beat at the casual way Diego discussed what seemed like an impossible dream. Advanced prosthetics were the domain of specialized medical companies with million-dollar research budgets, not neighborhood auto mechanics working out of converted garages. Yet she couldn't deny what she was seeing. Her son operating a sophisticated robotic device with natural ease, his face glowing with the kind of happiness she hadn't seen since before he'd started school and begun to understand how different he was from other children. "Could you really build something like that?" Jennifer asked, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice while already knowing that whatever Diego might charge for such a project would be far beyond their means. Diego looked at Tyler, who had stopped manipulating the robotic arm and was now staring at the adults with an expression that contained both hope and fear. The boy understood that this conversation would determine whether his dreams of mechanical assistance remained fantasies or became achievable goals. The weight of that responsibility settled on Diego's shoulders like a familiar burden, the same sense of moral obligation that drove him to fix cars for less than they were worth and teach neighborhood children about robotics in his spare time. "I could try," Diego said simply, the words carrying a commitment that he knew would consume his evenings and weekends for months to come. It wouldn't be easy, and I can't promise it would work as well as the expensive commercial versions, but I think I could build something that would help Tyler do the things he wants to do. Tyler's whoop of excitement echoed through the auto shop, drawing curious glances from other customers and a broad smile from Diego's face. In that moment, a mechanic who fixed broken cars for a living had just committed to fixing something far more complex and infinitely more important, a little boy's sense of what was possible in his life. Neither Diego nor Tyler could have predicted that this commitment would soon attract attention from people whose interest in robotic prosthetics had nothing to do with helping children, and everything to do with creating enhanced soldiers for the battlefield. The project began that very evening in Diego's makeshift workshop behind the auto shop. After Tyler and Jennifer had left with promises to return the following week to discuss the prosthetic project in detail, Diego found himself unable to concentrate on his usual repair work. His mind was already racing through the engineering challenges that would need to be solved to transform his workbench demonstration into a functional prosthetic device that an 8-year-old could wear and operate comfortably. The first challenge was power. His workshop robot ran on standard wall current, which was obviously impossible for a wearable device. Diego would need to design a battery system that could power the servo motors for a full day of normal use, while remaining light enough that Tyler could wear the prosthetic without fatigue. Lithium polymer batteries offered the best power-to-weight ratio, but they required careful charging circuits to prevent dangerous overheating. Diego made notes about battery capacity calculations and began sketching power management systems that could extend operating time through intelligent motor control. The second major challenge was control. His workshop robot used a simple joystick interface that required Tyler's good hand to operate, which defeated the purpose of providing bilateral functionality. A truly useful prosthetic would need to respond to muscle signals from Tyler's residual limb, translating small electrical impulses into precise mechanical movements. Diego had read about myoelectric prosthetics in his robotics research, but the signal processing required was far more complex than anything he had attempted in his hobby projects. The third challenge was mechanical design. The robotic arm that had impressed Tyler was built from steel components designed for workshop durability, not human comfort. A prosthetic version would need to be constructed from lightweight materials that could withstand daily use while remaining comfortable against human skin. Diego would need to learn about biocompatible materials, ergonomic design principles, and the specialized attachment systems that connected prosthetic devices to residual limbs. As Diego worked late into the night, sketching designs and researching technical specifications, he began to understand the magnitude of what he had committed to undertaking. This wasn't just an engineering project, it was a comprehensive research and development effort that would require skills he didn't possess and resources he couldn't afford. Yet every time doubt crept into his mind, he remembered the expression on Tyler's face when the robotic fingers had first closed around that wrench, and his determination solidified into unshakable resolve. The research phase consumed every spare moment of Diego's time over the following weeks. During his lunch breaks, he studied academic papers about prosthetic control systems downloaded from university websites. In the evenings after the shop closed, he experimented with different sensor configurations that could detect muscle contractions in Tyler's residual limb. On weekends, he visited medical supply stores and prosthetic clinics, asking detailed questions about attachment mechanisms and wearing comfort that often exceeded the knowledge of sales staff who were more accustomed to selling pre-manufactured devices than discussing custom engineering solutions. Diego's military background proved invaluable during this research phase. His experience with complex vehicle systems had taught him how to break down complicated problems into manageable components, and his understanding of field maintenance helped him prioritize reliability and simplicity over unnecessary sophistication. The prosthetic device would need to function consistently in the harsh environment of an 8-year-old's daily life, surviving playground activities, accidental impacts, and the kind of rough handling that children gave to everything they owned. The design that emerged from this research period was elegant in its simplicity, while sophisticated in its execution. Diego planned to build the prosthetic around a carbon fiber frame that would provide strength while minimizing weight. 5 servo motors would control the thumb and 4 fingers independently, allowing for a wide range of gripping configurations. A sixth motor would provide wrist rotation, enabling Tyler to orient his mechanical hand naturally for different tasks. The entire assembly would be powered by a compact lithium polymer battery pack worn on Tyler's belt, connected to the prosthetic through a thin cable that could be hidden under clothing. The control system represented Diego's most innovative contribution to prosthetic technology. Instead of requiring Tyler to learn complex muscle contraction patterns that controlled individual fingers, Diego designed an intelligent system that could recognize the boy's intention based on the object he was trying to grasp. Sensors in the fingertips would detect contact with objects and automatically adjust grip strength and finger position to provide secure holding without crushing delicate items. Tyler would only need to trigger the grip activation through a simple muscle contraction, while the prosthetic's computer brain handled the complex coordination required for functional manipulation. Building the physical device required Diego to develop manufacturing skills that went far beyond automotive repair. He learned to work with carbon fiber composites, creating lightweight structural components in his shop's makeshift clean room, constructed from plastic sheeting and filtered air circulation. He mastered precision machining techniques, fabricating custom joint assemblies on a small lathe that he purchased secondhand from a defunct machine shop. Most challenging of all, he taught himself circuit board design and assembly, creating the electronic control systems that would serve as the prosthetic's nervous system. The first prototype was completed on a cold December evening, exactly 3 months after Tyler had first seen Diego's workshop robot. The device looked nothing like the crude mechanical prosthetics that Tyler had tried in the past. Its carbon fiber construction gave it a sleek, high-tech appearance that could have come from a science fiction movie, while its articulated fingers moved with fluid precision that rivaled human dexterity. Diego had even included LED status indicators that would show Tyler the prosthetic's operational status and battery level through soft blue lights built into the wrist assembly. The fitting appointment took place on a Saturday morning when the auto shop was closed and Diego could focus entirely on Tyler's needs. Jennifer had brought her son to the shop early, and both mother and child were visibly nervous about whether 3 months of work would result in a functional device or an expensive disappointment. Diego had prepared carefully for this moment, calibrating the control system and testing every mechanical function to ensure that Tyler's first experience with his new prosthetic would be positive. The attachment process was more complex than simply strapping the device to Tyler's residual limb. Diego had designed a custom socket that would distribute the prosthetic's weight evenly while providing secure connection points for both mechanical attachment and electrical contact. Sensors built into the socket would detect muscle contractions in Tyler's forearm, translating those signals into control commands for the mechanical fingers. The fitting required careful adjustment of sensor sensitivity and positioning to ensure that Tyler could activate the prosthetic reliably without triggering accidental movements. When the prosthetic was finally activated and Tyler saw his mechanical fingers respond to his muscle contractions for the first time, his reaction was everything Diego had hoped for and more. The boy's eyes filled with tears of joy as he watched his new left hand open and close under his conscious control. The movements were smooth and natural, far more sophisticated than anything Tyler had imagined was possible. For the first time in his life, he had 2 functional hands. The testing session that followed revealed both the remarkable capabilities of Diego's creation and areas where further refinement would be needed. Tyler quickly learned to control basic gripping functions, successfully picking up objects ranging from delicate flowers to heavy tools. The prosthetic's intelligent grip system automatically adjusted to each object's characteristics, providing just enough force to maintain secure contact without causing damage. Tyler's natural intelligence and eagerness to learn accelerated the adaptation process, and within an hour he was performing complex manipulation tasks that would normally require weeks of practice with conventional prosthetics. But the most powerful moment came when Tyler used his new prosthetic to tie his shoes for the first time in his life. The task required bilateral coordination, fine motor control, and the kind of complex finger positioning that conventional prosthetics couldn't provide. Diego watched with tears in his own eyes as Tyler's mechanical fingers worked in perfect coordination with his biological hand, threading laces through eyelets and pulling them tight with movements that looked completely natural. When Tyler stood up and announced that he had tied his own shoes, Jennifer broke down in grateful tears that she had been holding back since the fitting began. The success of Tyler's prosthetic created immediate ripple effects throughout the neighborhood and beyond. Word spread quickly through the community about the mechanic who had built a robotic arm for a local child, transforming Diego from a respected local businessman into something approaching a neighborhood hero. Parents of other children with limb differences began stopping by the shop to ask whether Diego could help their families. Medical professionals who heard about the project through Jennifer's contacts at the hospital requested meetings to understand how an auto mechanic had achieved results that often exceeded expensive commercial prosthetics. But the attention that would prove most significant came from sources that Diego never could have anticipated. The military-industrial complex had developed sophisticated systems for monitoring technological innovations that might have defense applications, and Diego's prosthetic project had triggered several automated alert systems designed to identify emerging capabilities in robotics and human augmentation. Within weeks of Tyler's successful fitting, Diego's name and project details were circulating through Pentagon offices and defense contractor boardrooms, where people saw very different applications for technology designed to help children. The first indication that Diego's small act of kindness had attracted powerful attention came through what seemed like a routine business inquiry. A well-dressed man identifying himself as Dr. Robert Chen from Advanced Biomedical Solutions had called the auto shop requesting a meeting to discuss potential collaboration on prosthetic development. Diego had assumed this was another medical professional interested in understanding his design approach, and he had agreed to the meeting without suspecting that Dr. Chen's real interest lay in understanding whether Diego's innovations could be scaled up for military enhancement applications. The meeting took place on a quiet Thursday afternoon in Diego's workshop, with Tyler present to demonstrate the prosthetics' capabilities. Dr. Chen was impressed by the device's sophisticated control systems and the natural way Tyler operated his mechanical hand. But his questions revealed interests that went beyond pediatric prosthetics. He wanted to know about the system's strength capabilities, whether multiple prosthetic limbs could be controlled simultaneously, and whether the technology could be adapted for enhancement rather than replacement applications. Diego answered the questions honestly, still believing he was speaking to a medical researcher interested in helping other children. He explained how the system could theoretically be scaled up to provide superhuman strength, how neural interface technology could eliminate the need for muscle contraction controls, and how full-body exoskeleton systems could provide comprehensive physical enhancement. He had no way of knowing that Dr. Chen was recording every word and taking detailed notes about potential military applications that could transform individual soldiers into enhanced combat units. The true nature of Dr. Chen's interest became clear only when he made an offer that revealed the real scope of what Diego had accomplished. Advanced Biomedical Solutions was prepared to purchase Diego's prosthetic designs and hire him as a senior engineer at a salary that exceeded his annual auto shop income by a factor of 10. They would provide unlimited research funding, access to military-grade materials and manufacturing facilities, and the opportunity to work on projects that could revolutionize human augmentation technology. The only requirement was that Diego would need to relocate to a secure facility and agree to work exclusively on defense-related applications of his innovations. The offer was simultaneously exciting and terrifying. Diego had never imagined that his small workshop project could have value to major corporations, and the financial security being offered would transform his life in ways he had never dared to dream. But something about Dr. Chen's emphasis on defense applications and the requirement for security clearances suggested that accepting this offer would mean abandoning the community-focused approach that had motivated his work on Tyler's prosthetic. The technology that had been created to help a child would be transformed into military hardware designed for very different purposes. Diego requested time to consider the offer, but Dr. Chen's response revealed the urgency that major defense contractors felt about securing Diego's innovations before competitors discovered them. Advanced Biomedical Solutions would need an answer within 48 hours, and they strongly encouraged Diego not to discuss the offer with anyone outside his immediate family. The implication was clear. This opportunity would not remain available indefinitely, and Diego's small window of leverage was already closing. That evening, as Diego sat in his workshop surrounded by the tools and components that had made Tyler's prosthetic possible, he faced a decision that would determine not just his own future, but the ultimate purpose of technology he had created out of love for a child. The path forward would require him to choose between personal advancement and community commitment, between the security that came with corporate backing and the freedom that came with independent innovation. Whatever he decided would echo far beyond his small auto shop, affecting not just Tyler's future but the futures of countless other children who might benefit from technology designed to help rather than harm. The 48 hours that followed Dr. Chen's offer were among the most difficult of Diego's life. He found himself unable to concentrate on routine auto repairs, his mind constantly returning to the implications of the choice he faced. The financial security being offered would eliminate the daily stress of running a small business in a challenging economy, provide resources for innovations he could only dream of in his current circumstances, and potentially allow him to help far more people than he could reach through his neighborhood workshop. Yet something fundamental within Diego rebelled against the idea of transforming technology created to help Tyler into weapons systems designed to give soldiers superhuman capabilities on battlefields around the world. The decision became even more complicated when Diego realized that refusing the offer might not protect his innovations from military applications. Dr. Chen had been remarkably well informed about Diego's design specifications and control algorithms, suggesting that corporate intelligence gathering had already documented much of his work. If advanced biomedical solutions could reverse engineer his prosthetic technology from publicly available information or through Tyler's medical records, Diego's refusal to cooperate would simply mean that he wouldn't benefit financially from military development of his innovations. Sleep became impossible as Diego wrestled with ethical implications that extended far beyond his personal circumstances. If his prosthetic technology could genuinely help injured soldiers regain functionality after combat injuries, wasn't there a moral obligation to make that technology available, regardless of his personal feelings about military applications? On the other hand, if the same technology could be used to create enhanced combat units that would make warfare more deadly and destructive, didn't he bear responsibility for preventing such applications even if it meant sacrificing personal opportunities? The complexity of the decision was compounded by Diego's awareness that his choice would affect not just abstract ethical principles but real people, whose faces he knew and whose lives he cared about. Tyler's continued access to prosthetic improvements and repairs depended on Diego's ability to maintain his workshop and continue developing the technology that had transformed the boy's life. Jennifer Bennett had already begun asking about the possibility of prosthetic upgrades as Tyler grew, and Diego knew that several other families in the neighborhood were hoping he could help their children with similar innovations. Diego's military background added another layer of complexity to his decision-making process. His 4 years of Army service had given him deep respect for the sacrifices that soldiers made in service to their country, and he understood better than most civilians the devastating impact that combat injuries could have on young men and women who had volunteered to protect others. If his prosthetic technology could restore functionality to veterans who had lost limbs in service, wasn't there a patriotic obligation to make that technology available regardless of potential misuse? Yet, Diego also understood that military applications of his technology would likely focus on enhancement rather than restoration, creating soldiers with capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations rather than simply helping injured veterans regain lost functionality. The same servo motors that allowed Tyler to tie his shoes could provide a soldier with crushing grip strength that could be used as a weapon. The control systems that enabled Tyler to manipulate delicate objects could allow enhanced soldiers to perform precise tasks in combat situations that would be impossible for unaugmented personnel. The breakthrough in Diego's decision-making process came through an unexpected source: Tyler himself. On the second evening after Dr. Chen's visit, Tyler and Jennifer had stopped by the shop for a routine adjustment to the prosthetic's grip sensitivity. While Diego was fine-tuning the control parameters, Tyler had asked a question that cut to the heart of the ethical dilemma Diego was facing. "Diego, if other kids could have prosthetics like mine, would that be good?" Tyler asked with the straightforward moral clarity that children often brought to complex adult problems. "Of course it would be good," Diego replied, still focused on the technical adjustments he was making. "Every kid who needs a prosthetic should have access to the best technology available. What if grown-ups wanted to use the same technology to hurt people instead of helping them?" Tyler continued, his 8-year-old mind grappling with concepts that Diego had been wrestling with for days. Would that make the technology bad, or would the grown-ups be bad for using it wrong? The question stopped Diego's hands in mid-adjustment, as he realized that Tyler had articulated the fundamental issue more clearly than all of Diego's hours of complex ethical reasoning. The technology itself was morally neutral. Its ethical implications depended entirely on how it was used and by whom. Diego's responsibility wasn't to prevent all possible misuse of his innovations, but to ensure that the technology's primary applications remained focused on helping people rather than harming them. With this clarity came a path forward that Diego hadn't previously considered. Instead of choosing between corporate development and community independence, Diego could create a hybrid approach that would allow him to benefit from corporate resources while maintaining control over how his technology was developed and applied. He could establish his own research organization, seek funding from multiple sources including defense contractors, and maintain final authority over which applications received his support and which were declined on ethical grounds. The decision crystallized into action over the weekend as Diego drafted a counteroffer that would fundamentally alter the terms of his relationship with Advanced Biomedical Solutions. Instead of selling his technology and becoming their employee, Diego proposed licensing specific applications of his innovations while retaining ownership of the underlying intellectual property. He would collaborate on prosthetic development for military and civilian applications, but any enhancements designed purely for combat effectiveness would require separate negotiations and additional ethical review processes. The proposal also included provisions for community access that reflected Diego's commitment to ensuring that children like Tyler wouldn't be priced out of technological solutions that could transform their lives. A percentage of all licensing revenues would fund a foundation dedicated to providing advanced prosthetics to families who couldn't afford commercial devices. Diego would maintain his auto shop and community workshop, using corporate collaboration to enhance rather than replace his neighborhood-focused innovations. Dr. Chen's response to Diego's counteroffer revealed both the urgency that defense contractors felt about securing his technology and their willingness to accommodate terms that might seem unusual in typical corporate acquisitions. Advanced Biomedical Solutions accepted Diego's licensing proposal with modifications that actually improved the financial terms while providing access to research facilities and manufacturing capabilities that exceeded anything Diego had imagined possible. The arrangement would allow him to maintain his independence while accessing resources that could accelerate development of prosthetic technology by years rather than decades. The contract signing took place at Advanced Biomedical Solutions' Phoenix facility, a sprawling complex of laboratories and manufacturing facilities that looked more like a university campus than a defense contractor's headquarters. Diego was accompanied by Tyler and Jennifer, both of whom he had insisted should be present for the ceremony that would launch the next phase of prosthetic development. Tyler's presence served as a visible reminder of the humanitarian applications that had motivated Diego's original research, while Jennifer's medical background would prove valuable in ensuring that corporate development priorities remained focused on patient needs rather than purely technical capabilities. The facility tour that followed the contract ceremony opened Diego's eyes to the scale and sophistication of modern defense research and development. Advanced Biomedical Solutions employed hundreds of engineers, medical researchers, and manufacturing specialists working on projects that ranged from basic prosthetic devices to experimental human augmentation systems that pushed the boundaries of what was considered ethically acceptable in military applications. Diego's innovations would be integrated into research programs that had been operating for years, with budgets that exceeded the gross domestic product of small nations. The research team that Diego was introduced to included specialists whose expertise complemented his own mechanical and programming skills in ways that promised rapid advancement of prosthetic technology. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was a biomedical engineer who had spent a decade developing neural interface systems that could read motor intent directly from brain signals, eliminating the need for muscle contraction controls entirely. Her work could potentially allow Tyler to control his prosthetic through thought alone, providing a level of intuitive operation that would make the artificial limb feel like a natural extension of his body. Dr. James Rodriguez specialized in materials science, developing lightweight composites and smart materials that could provide prosthetic devices with capabilities that exceeded biological limbs. His laboratory contained prototypes of artificial muscles made from shape memory alloys that contracted and expanded like biological tissue, prosthetic skin that could provide tactile feedback to users, and energy harvesting systems that could power prosthetic devices through normal body movement rather than requiring external battery charging. The manufacturing facilities that would produce Diego's prosthetic designs operated at a level of precision and automation that made his workshop seem primitive by comparison. Computer-controlled machining centers could fabricate components with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, while clean room assembly areas provided the sterile environment necessary for producing medical devices that would be implanted in human bodies. 3D printing systems could create custom prosthetic sockets perfectly fitted to individual patients based on detailed body scans, eliminating the lengthy fitting processes that had traditionally made prosthetic fabrication expensive and time-consuming. But perhaps the most impressive aspect of advanced biomedical solutions' capabilities was their testing and validation infrastructure. Specialized laboratories could simulate years of normal use in accelerated testing protocols, ensuring that prosthetic devices would function reliably throughout their intended service life. Biomechanical analysis systems could measure the efficiency and naturalness of prosthetic movement, identifying areas where design improvements could enhance user comfort and functionality. Clinical testing programs provided access to volunteer users who could evaluate prototypes under real-world conditions and provide feedback that guided further development. The integration of Diego's innovations into this sophisticated research environment proceeded rapidly, with initial results that exceeded everyone's expectations. The control algorithms that Diego had developed for Tyler's prosthetic proved remarkably adaptable to different user populations and prosthetic configurations. Veterans who had lost limbs in combat were able to master Diego's intuitive control systems in a fraction of the time required by conventional prosthetics, while children who had never experienced normal bilateral function learned to operate their artificial limbs, with natural ease. The most significant breakthrough came when Dr. Mitchell's neural interface technology was combined with Diego's intelligent control systems to create prosthetic devices that responded directly to users' thoughts. The hybrid system read motor intent from brain signals and translated those commands into precise mechanical movements that felt completely natural to users. Tyler was among the first test subjects for this advanced system, and his reaction when he realized he could control his prosthetic hand simply by thinking about moving it was a moment of pure wonder that reminded everyone involved why their work mattered. The neural interface prosthetic eliminated the learning curve that typically accompanied prosthetic adaptation, allowing users to operate their artificial limbs with the same unconscious ease they had once used their biological extremities. Tyler could now scratch his nose, wave goodbye, or pick up a pencil without any conscious effort to activate control systems or adjust grip strength. The prosthetic had become truly transparent, functioning as an extension of his nervous system rather than a tool that required deliberate operation. Clinical testing of the neural interface system revealed capabilities that approached science fiction in their sophistication. Users reported being able to feel texture and temperature through their prosthetic hands, sensations made possible by advanced tactile feedback systems that stimulated residual nerves and patterns that the brain interpreted as natural touch. The artificial limbs could provide grip strength that exceeded normal human capabilities while maintaining the delicate control necessary for activities like writing or playing musical instruments. But as the technology advanced and gained recognition within medical and military communities, Diego began to understand the full implications of what he had helped create. The same neural interface systems that allowed Tyler to control his prosthetic through thought could potentially be used to control multiple artificial limbs simultaneously, creating enhanced individuals with 4 or 6 functional arms. The tactile feedback systems that provided prosthetic users with natural sensations could be enhanced to provide superhuman sensitivity that would allow military personnel to detect threats through touch alone. Most concerning to Diego was the growing interest from military commanders who saw his prosthetic technology as a pathway to creating enhanced soldiers rather than helping injured veterans. Project briefings that had initially focused on restoration and rehabilitation increasingly emphasized enhancement and augmentation, with discussions of how healthy soldiers could be equipped with additional artificial limbs that would provide capabilities impossible for purely biological personnel. The ethical implications of these applications troubled Diego deeply, but his concerns were complicated by the genuine medical benefits that continued to emerge from the research program. Children like Tyler were receiving prosthetic devices that transformed their lives in ways that would have been impossible without corporate research capabilities. Veterans who had lost multiple limbs in combat were regaining full functionality through prosthetic systems that provided bilateral coordination and natural operation. Elderly patients who had lost limbs to disease were maintaining their independence through lightweight, comfortable prosthetics that required minimal maintenance and provided years of reliable service. The tension between beneficial medical applications and concerning military uses came to a head during a project review meeting, where military officials presented their vision for next-generation combat units. The presentation included detailed plans for equipping healthy soldiers with additional artificial limbs that would allow them to carry heavier weapons, manipulate multiple tools simultaneously, and perform tasks that would be impossible for unaugmented personnel. The artificial limbs would be powered by portable fusion cells that provided virtually unlimited energy, while neural interfaces would allow soldiers to control their enhanced capabilities through direct thought commands. Diego's objections to these applications were met with arguments that revealed the complex moral landscape surrounding military technology development. The enhanced soldiers would be volunteers who understood the risks and benefits of augmentation procedures. The additional capabilities would allow smaller military units to accomplish missions that currently required large numbers of personnel, potentially reducing overall casualty rates. Most importantly, other nations were already developing similar enhancement technologies, and American military superiority depended on staying ahead of potential adversaries in the augmentation arms race. The debate that followed forced Diego to confront fundamental questions about the relationship between technological innovation and moral responsibility. Did inventors have the right to control how their creations were used? Or did society have broader claims on technologies that could provide significant benefits despite potential for misuse? Was there a meaningful distinction between developing enhancements for injured individuals and creating augmentations for healthy soldiers? Could the beneficial medical applications of prosthetic technology justify accepting military applications that might lead to more destructive warfare? The resolution came through a compromise that reflected both Diego's ethical concerns and the military's operational requirements. Future development would proceed along two separate tracks, with medical applications receiving priority and full support, while military enhancement projects would be subject to additional ethical review processes and restricted development timelines. Diego would maintain veto authority over specific applications that he considered ethically problematic, while advanced biomedical solutions would retain the right to pursue alternative approaches to military requirements that didn't depend on Diego's direct participation. The compromise arrangement allowed Tyler's prosthetic technology to continue advancing along medical applications, while providing Diego with the resources and expertise necessary to help far more children than he could have reached through his neighborhood workshop alone. Within 6 months of the corporate partnership, Diego's foundation had provided advanced prosthetics to over 50 children across the southwestern United States, with manufacturing costs reduced by more than 80% through economies of scale and automated production processes. Tyler himself became something of a celebrity within the prosthetic community, demonstrating his neural interface prosthetic at medical conferences and children's hospitals, where his natural enthusiasm and obvious comfort with the technology encouraged other young amputees to consider advanced prosthetic options. His school presentations about living with a robotic arm inspired countless children to pursue interests in engineering and medical technology, while his participation in youth sports programs demonstrated that prosthetic users could compete on equal terms with their peers in most activities. The success of Tyler's prosthetic also attracted attention from international medical organizations that were seeking solutions for children in developing countries who had lost limbs to conflict, disease, or accidents. Diego found himself consulting on projects that would establish prosthetic manufacturing facilities in regions where advanced medical technology had previously been unavailable, bringing hope to thousands of families who had never imagined that artificial limbs could provide functional restoration rather than merely cosmetic improvement. But the most personally meaningful aspect of Diego's expanding influence was the transformation of his neighborhood auto shop into an informal community center, where local children gathered to learn about engineering, robotics, and the possibility that technology could be used to solve human problems rather than create them. The workshop where Tyler's prosthetic had been conceived had become a launching pad for young innovators who were inspired by the example of a mechanic who had changed a child's life through creativity, determination, and compassion. The success story that had begun with a simple act of kindness had grown into something far larger than Diego had ever imagined possible. Tyler's transformation from a child limited by physical disability to a confident young person who saw no barriers to his future aspirations had inspired a movement that was changing how society thought about the relationship between technology and human potential. The ripple effects extended far beyond prosthetic applications, influencing educational programs, medical research priorities, and public policies that determined how innovative technologies were developed and distributed. Yet as Diego reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point, he remained grounded in the simple truth that had motivated his original decision to help Tyler. Technology was only as valuable as its ability to improve human lives. and the most sophisticated innovations were meaningless if they didn't serve the needs of real people facing genuine challenges. The neural interface prosthetics, automated manufacturing systems, and corporate research facilities were impressive, but their ultimate significance lay in the smile on Tyler's face when he tied his shoes each morning, without thinking about the mechanical miracle that made such simple independence possible. The relationship between Diego and Tyler had evolved as well, from mechanic and customer to collaborators in a shared mission that extended far beyond any single prosthetic device. Tyler's insights as a user had proven invaluable in guiding technical development, while his enthusiasm for sharing his experience with other children had helped establish support networks that made prosthetic adaptation easier for families facing similar challenges. Their partnership demonstrated that innovation was most powerful when it emerged from genuine understanding of user needs rather than abstract technical possibilities. Jennifer Benet's role in the story had also expanded beyond that of grateful parent to become an advocate for policies that would make advanced prosthetic technology accessible to families regardless of their economic circumstances. Her medical background and personal experience with the challenges of raising a child with special needs had given her unique credibility in discussions of healthcare policy, insurance coverage, and the social responsibilities of medical technology companies. She had become a powerful voice for ensuring that technological advances served all children who could benefit from them, not just those whose families could afford premium medical care. The financial security that had come with Diego's corporate partnership had allowed him to expand his community outreach efforts while maintaining the personal connections that kept his work grounded in real human needs. The auto shop continued to serve neighborhood customers who depended on affordable repair services, while the back workshop had grown into a proper laboratory where local children could explore engineering concepts through hands-on projects. Diego had hired additional staff to handle routine automotive work, freeing his time for prosthetic development and educational activities that had become equally important to his sense of purpose. The most recent addition to Diego's expanded operation was a formal internship program that provided local high school students with exposure to advanced manufacturing and robotics technologies. Many of these students came from families that had never imagined their children could pursue careers in engineering or medical technology. But Diego's example had demonstrated that technical innovation could emerge from unexpected places when curiosity was combined with determination and community support. Tyler's academic performance had flourished as his confidence grew, and his prosthetic eliminated the practical limitations that had previously restricted his participation in school activities. His standardized test scores placed him in the top percentile of students statewide, while his science fair projects consistently earned recognition at regional and national competitions. Teachers who had initially worried about accommodating a student with physical disabilities now pointed to Tyler as an example of how assistive technology could level playing fields and allow all students to achieve their potential. The transformation extended beyond academic achievement to social integration and leadership development that would have seemed impossible when Tyler first walked into Diego's auto shop as a shy 8-year-old who avoided activities that highlighted his physical differences. Tyler now served as a peer mentor for other children with disabilities, helping them navigate the social and practical challenges of growing up with prosthetic devices. His natural empathy and first-hand experience with adaptation made him remarkably effective at encouraging other children to embrace technological solutions that could expand their possibilities. The medical community's recognition of Diego's contributions had grown to include honorary degrees from universities, whose engineering programs incorporated case studies based on Tyler's prosthetic development. Professional conferences regularly featured presentations about the innovative control systems and user-centered design principles that had emerged from a neighborhood auto shop, challenging conventional assumptions about where breakthrough medical technology was most likely to originate. But perhaps the most significant indicator of the project's impact was the growing number of children who approached Diego with engineering challenges that went beyond prosthetic applications. Young people who had been inspired by Tyler's story were bringing their own ideas for technological solutions to community problems, seeking guidance and support for projects that ranged from assistive devices for elderly neighbors to environmental monitoring systems for local schools. Diego's workshop had become a hub for youth innovation that was fostering a new generation of problem solvers who understood that technology was most powerful when it served human needs. The military applications of Diego's technology had proceeded along the parallel track established by the Compromise Agreement, with results that validated both his ethical concerns and the potential benefits of carefully controlled enhancement research. Veterans who had lost limbs in combat were receiving prosthetic devices that provided functionality that exceeded their original biological capabilities, while enhanced tactile feedback systems allowed users to perform precision tasks that would have been impossible with conventional prosthetics. The military enhancement applications had been more carefully controlled, with volunteer programs that provided additional artificial limbs to soldiers whose duties required capabilities beyond normal human limitations. Bomb disposal specialists could now work with prosthetic arms that provided both superhuman strength and delicate sensitivity, while special operations personnel could carry equipment loads that would have been impossible for unaugmented soldiers. The enhancements were temporary and reversible, addressing Diego's concerns about permanent modifications to healthy individuals, while providing military commanders with the enhanced capabilities they needed for specific missions. International interest in Diego's prosthetic technology had led to collaboration agreements with medical organizations in countries where conflict and poverty had created large populations of children needing prosthetic devices. Manufacturing partnerships were establishing production facilities that could produce advanced prosthetics at costs low enough to make them accessible in developing economies, while training programs were creating local expertise in prosthetic fitting and maintenance that would sustain these efforts over time. The global expansion of prosthetic access was creating network effects that accelerated innovation and improved outcomes for users worldwide. Children in different countries were sharing experiences and suggestions through online platforms that connected young prosthetic users across cultural and geographic boundaries. Engineers in various facilities were collaborating on improvements that emerged from diverse user populations and environmental conditions, creating prosthetic designs that were more robust and adaptable than any single development team could have achieved independently. Tyler's role in this expanding network had evolved from test subject to ambassador and advocate, with his story inspiring families around the world who were facing similar challenges. His video presentations about living with a neural interface prosthetic had been translated into dozens of languages, while his participation in international conferences had made him a recognizable figure in the global prosthetic community. At 12 years old, Tyler was already thinking about career paths that would allow him to contribute to the technological innovations that had transformed his own life. The educational impact of Tyler's story had extended into formal academic curricula, with engineering programs using his prosthetic development as a case study that illustrated the intersection of technical innovation and social responsibility. Medical schools were incorporating discussions of user-centered design principles that emphasized the importance of understanding patient needs rather than simply implementing technically sophisticated solutions. Business programs were analyzing the corporate partnership model that had allowed Diego to maintain community connections while accessing resources necessary for large-scale impact. The success of Diego's foundation in providing prosthetics to families who couldn't afford commercial devices had attracted support from philanthropic organizations whose missions aligned with making advanced medical technology accessible regardless of economic circumstances. Corporate sponsors were funding expansion of manufacturing capabilities, while individual donors were supporting programs that provided ongoing maintenance and upgrade services for children whose prosthetic needs would evolve as they grew and their activity levels changed. The impact on Diego's own life had been profound, but remained grounded in the values that had motivated his original decision to help Tyler. Financial security had eliminated the daily stress of running a small business on tight margins, but Diego continued to live in the same neighborhood and maintain the personal relationships that kept his work connected to real human needs. The recognition and honors that had accompanied his professional success were gratifying, but the moments that mattered most to him remained the simple interactions with children who were discovering what was possible when technology was designed to expand rather than limit their opportunities. The relationship between Diego and advanced biomedical solutions had matured into a partnership that balanced corporate efficiency with community responsiveness, in ways that neither party had initially expected would be possible. Diego's veto authority over military applications had been exercised sparingly but decisively, preventing development of enhancement technologies that he considered ethically problematic while allowing beneficial applications to proceed. The company's access to Diego's innovations had accelerated their research timeline and enhanced their reputation within the medical community, while Diego's foundation had created marketing advantages that demonstrated corporate social responsibility in tangible ways. The technical advances that had emerged from the corporate partnership continued to push the boundaries of what was possible in prosthetic technology. Neural interface systems that had initially required surgical implantation were being replaced by non-invasive sensors that could read motor intent through skin contact, eliminating the medical risks associated with implanted devices while maintaining the intuitive control that made neural prosthetics so effective. Battery technology improvements had extended operational time to weeks rather than hours, while wireless charging systems eliminated the need for physical connections that had previously been sources of mechanical failure. The most recent innovation was the development of prosthetic devices that could grow with their users, automatically adjusting size and capabilities as children developed physically and cognitively. Tyler's current prosthetic included adaptive mechanisms that would extend the device's length as his residual limb grew, while software updates could add new functionality as his coordination and strength increased. The growing prosthetic eliminated the need for frequent device replacement that had traditionally made pediatric prosthetics expensive and inconvenient for families. But the technology was approaching capabilities that raised new ethical questions about the relationship between human and artificial enhancement. Prosthetic devices could now provide strength that far exceeded normal human capabilities, while sensory enhancements could give users perception abilities that surpassed biological limitations. The line between restoration and augmentation was becoming increasingly blurred, forcing society to grapple with fundamental questions about what constituted normal human function and whether technological enhancement should be considered a medical treatment or an elective improvement. Tyler's perspective on these questions had evolved as he had grown from a child grateful for basic functionality to a young person who understood the broader implications of the technology that had transformed his life. He recognized that his prosthetic provided capabilities that exceeded what his biological arm would have offered, but he also understood that these enhancements allowed him to participate fully in activities that other children took for granted. The ethical questions that concerned adults seemed less relevant to Tyler than the practical question of whether technological innovations helped people live better lives. The community that had formed around Diego's workshop had become a testing ground for how society might integrate advanced prosthetic technology into daily life, while maintaining human connections and values that couldn't be replicated by artificial devices. Children who grew up with neural interface prosthetics developed different relationships with technology than previous generations, seeing artificial devices as extensions of themselves rather than external tools. Their natural comfort with human-machine integration suggested that future generations might approach enhancement technologies with less anxiety and more practical focus on beneficial applications. The ripple effects of Tyler's story continued to expand through channels that no one had anticipated when Diego first decided to build a prosthetic device in his neighborhood auto shop. Medical students who had been inspired by the case were choosing specializations in prosthetic development and rehabilitation medicine. Engineering students were pursuing research projects focused on assistive technology and user-centered design. Policymakers were reconsidering healthcare regulations and insurance coverage rules that had traditionally made advanced prosthetics accessible only to wealthy families. International development organizations had adopted Diego's manufacturing and distribution models for establishing prosthetic access in regions where medical infrastructure was limited, but local technical expertise could be developed through training programs. The combination of automated manufacturing systems and simplified maintenance protocols had made it possible to provide advanced prosthetics in environments where traditional medical device support would have been impossible to sustain. The partnership between Diego and Tyler had become a model for how technological innovation could emerge from genuine human relationships, rather than abstract research programs. Their collaboration demonstrated that the most effective assistive technologies were those that grew out of deep understanding of user needs and preferences, rather than engineering capabilities that were impressive but disconnected from real-world applications. The success of Tyler's prosthetic had less to do with its technical sophistication than with Diego's commitment to creating a device that would serve Tyler's specific goals and interests. As Tyler approached his 13th birthday, his aspirations had expanded beyond the immediate goals that had motivated Diego's original prosthetic design. Tyler was now thinking about career paths that would allow him to contribute to the technological innovations that continue to transform prosthetic capabilities, while also considering how his experience as a prosthetic user could inform broader efforts to make assistive technology more accessible and effective. His comfort with public speaking and natural empathy had made him an effective advocate for policies that would expand prosthetic access, while his technical understanding allowed him to contribute meaningfully to engineering discussions about future development priorities. The auto shop that had served as the birthplace for Tyler's prosthetic had evolved into something unprecedented. A community innovation center, where technological advancement was driven by human needs rather than market forces or military requirements. Children from throughout the region came to Diego's workshop to explore engineering concepts, develop problem-solving skills, and discover that technology could be a tool for positive change rather than a source of anxiety about human obsolescence. The success of this model had attracted attention from educational organizations and policymakers who were searching for approaches to STEM education that would engage students from diverse backgrounds while maintaining focus on beneficial applications of technological innovation. Diego's workshop demonstrated that hands-on learning experiences could be both technically sophisticated and deeply rooted in community values, creating educational opportunities that prepared students for careers in emerging fields while fostering social responsibility and ethical reasoning skills. The transformation that had begun with a simple act of kindness between a mechanic and a child had grown into a movement that was changing how society approached the intersection of technology and human potential. The ripple effects continued to expand through channels that connected individual success stories with broader social change, proving that innovation was most powerful when it served human needs and emerged from genuine understanding of the challenges that real people faced in their daily lives. Diego's reflection on the journey that had brought them to this point always returned to the fundamental truth that had motivated his original decision to help Tyler. Technology was only valuable to the extent that it improved human lives and expanded human possibilities. The neural interface prosthetics, automated manufacturing systems, and global distribution networks were impressive achievements, but their ultimate significance lay in the simple fact that children like Tyler could now pursue any dream they chose without being limited by physical disabilities that previous generations had considered permanent barriers to full participation in society. The story that had begun in a neighborhood auto shop had become proof that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they combined technical skills with compassion, determination, and a willingness to see possibilities where others saw only problems. Tyler's prosthetic had grown from a weekend project into a global movement that was transforming lives on multiple continents. But the heart of the story remained the relationship between a mechanic and a child who had discovered, together, that broken things could be fixed, and that limitations could be transformed into opportunities through creativity, persistence, and love. The phone call that would change everything came on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 4 years after Tyler first demonstrated his neural interface prosthetic to the world. Diego was underneath a pickup truck diagnosing a transmission leak when his assistant, Maria, called out that someone from the Department of Defense was holding on line 2. The caller identified himself as General Patricia Walsh, Director of Advanced Combat Systems, and her message was both urgent and unprecedented. Foreign intelligence had acquired detailed specifications for Diego's prosthetic technology, and hostile nations were already developing military applications that could fundamentally alter the balance of global power. The briefing that followed took place in a secure conference facility at Luke Air Force Base, where Diego found himself surrounded by military officials, intelligence analysts, and defense contractors, whose grim expressions suggested that the conversation would challenge everything he thought he understood about his technology's impact on the world. Satellite imagery displayed on wall-mounted screens showed manufacturing facilities in 3 different countries, where automated production lines were assembling prosthetic devices that bore unmistakable similarities to Tyler's design specifications. General Walsh explained that intelligence agencies had been tracking the spread of Diego's innovations through academic publications, medical conferences, and corporate partnerships that had seemed like positive developments when they occurred. The open approach that Diego had insisted upon to ensure global access to prosthetic technology had also made it relatively simple for hostile nations to reverse engineer his designs and adapt them for military applications that were far more aggressive than anything advanced biomedical solutions had considered. The most concerning development was evidence that several countries were moving beyond prosthetic applications to create enhancement systems for healthy soldiers that incorporated Diego's neural interface technology with weapons platforms and tactical systems. Satellite reconnaissance had identified training facilities where soldiers equipped with multiple artificial limbs were learning to operate heavy weapons and specialized equipment that would be impossible for unaugmented personnel to handle effectively. Intelligence reports suggested that these enhanced soldiers could carry ammunition loads that would normally require vehicle transport, operate multiple weapons simultaneously, and perform complex technical tasks while maintaining combat effectiveness that far exceeded conventional military units. The artificial limbs provided not just additional strength and dexterity, but also mounting points for sensors, communication equipment, and weapon systems that transformed individual soldiers into integrated combat platforms. But the most alarming aspect of these foreign developments was their apparent disregard for the safety protocols and ethical constraints that had governed Diego's original research. Intelligence indicated that enhancement procedures were being performed on soldiers without informed consent, while the artificial limbs being developed prioritized combat effectiveness over user safety or long-term health consequences. Several facilities showed evidence of experimental programs that were pushing enhancement technology far beyond anything that medical ethics would have permitted in civilian applications. General Walsh's presentation included intercepted communications suggesting that hostile nations viewed enhanced soldiers as expendable assets rather than valuable personnel who deserved protection and support. The artificial limbs being developed incorporated self-destruct mechanisms that could be activated remotely to prevent capture, while enhancement procedures included modifications that would make it impossible for soldiers to return to civilian life, even if they survived their military service. The briefing concluded with a request that Diego had been dreading since he first learned about foreign interest in his technology. The Department of Defense needed his direct assistance in developing countermeasures and defensive enhancements that could protect American forces against enemies equipped with technology based on his innovations. The military applications that Diego had carefully limited in his corporate partnerships were now necessary for national security, regardless of his personal reservations about enhancement technology. The weight of responsibility that settled on Diego's shoulders as he absorbed this information was unlike anything he had experienced during his years of prosthetic development. The technology that had been created to help Tyler tie his shoes was now being weaponized by hostile nations in ways that could threaten American soldiers and global stability. His attempts to maintain ethical control over military applications had been circumvented by foreign powers who had no interest in the humanitarian principles that had guided his original research. Tyler's reaction to the news was characteristically direct and morally clear in ways that cut through the complex strategic considerations that had paralyzed Diego's decision-making process. At 16, Tyler had grown into a thoughtful young man whose experience with prosthetic technology had given him unique insights into both its beneficial potential and its concerning implications. His response to the military briefing was immediate and unambiguous. If hostile nations were using corrupted versions of his prosthetic technology to threaten innocent people, then Diego had a moral obligation to help develop defensive measures that could protect those people. The ethical framework that Tyler articulated was simpler and more compelling than the abstract philosophical arguments that Diego had been wrestling with for days. The technology existed, and hostile applications were already being developed, regardless of Diego's participation or approval. The only question was whether American forces would have access to defensive capabilities that could protect them against enhanced enemies, or whether Diego's ethical reservations would leave American soldiers vulnerable to threats that existed because of innovations he had created. Jennifer Bennett's perspective added another dimension to the decision-making process that Diego hadn't fully considered. As a healthcare professional, she understood that the medical benefits of Diego's technology depended on maintaining American technological leadership in prosthetic development. If hostile nations gained significant advantages in enhancement technology, while American research was constrained by ethical limitations, the result could be military conflicts that would create more amputees who needed prosthetic assistance, while simultaneously reducing America's ability to provide advanced medical care. The conversation that followed lasted well into the evening, as Diego, Tyler, and Jennifer worked through the implications of various approaches to the military's request. They could refuse to participate and hope that other researchers would develop adequate defensive technologies, but intelligence assessments suggested that Diego's specific innovations were crucial to maintaining technological parity. They could participate fully in military enhancement programs, but that would mean abandoning the ethical constraints that had distinguished American research from the disturbing foreign applications they had learned about. The solution they eventually reached reflected Tyler's moral clarity combined with Diego's technical expertise and Jennifer's practical understanding of how complex systems could be designed to serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Diego would collaborate with military researchers to develop defensive technologies that could protect American forces against enhanced enemies, but all military applications would incorporate safety mechanisms and reversibility, features that prioritized soldier welfare over purely tactical considerations. The partnership agreement that emerged from negotiations with the Department of Defense was unprecedented in its scope and complexity, reflecting both the urgency of current threats and the long-term implications of enhancement technology for military operations. Diego would lead a joint research team that included military engineers, medical researchers, and ethicists, whose collective expertise would ensure that American enhancement programs maintained the humanitarian principles that had guided his original prosthetic development. The research facility established for this collaboration was located adjacent to Advanced Biomedical Solutions, existing complex, but with security protocols and operational procedures that reflected the classified nature of military applications. Diego's role would be to adapt his prosthetic innovations for defensive military use while maintaining oversight authority that could prevent applications he considered ethically problematic. Tyler would serve as a consultant whose user experience could inform development of enhancement systems that prioritized operator safety and effectiveness. The first defensive systems to emerge from this collaboration were designed specifically to protect American soldiers against the enhanced capabilities that hostile nations had developed, using stolen versions of Diego's technology. Advanced body armor incorporated sensors that could detect artificial limb movements and predict attack patterns, while communication systems provided real-time warnings about enhanced enemies in the operational area. More sophisticated defensive measures included electronic warfare capabilities that could disrupt the neural interface systems controlling enemy prosthetics, temporarily disabling enhanced soldiers without causing permanent harm. These systems represented a significant advancement over conventional military technology, but they remained focused on protection and defensive applications rather than creating enhanced American soldiers with aggressive capabilities. However, intelligence reports continued to indicate that hostile enhancement programs were advancing rapidly, with enemy soldiers receiving artificial limbs that provided capabilities far beyond anything that purely defensive measures could counter effectively. The artificial limbs being developed by hostile nations incorporated weapons systems, advanced sensors, and communication equipment that transformed individual soldiers into mobile command centers capable of coordinating complex military operations independently. The strategic implications of these developments forced American military planners to reconsider fundamental assumptions about future warfare and the role of enhanced personnel in military operations. Traditional advantages in training, equipment, and tactical coordination could be negated by enemy soldiers, whose artificial limbs provided superhuman strength, endurance, and multitasking capabilities that exceeded anything possible for unaugmented personnel. Diego's response to these escalating threats required him to move beyond purely defensive applications and begin developing enhancement technologies that could provide American forces with capabilities comparable to those being deployed by hostile nations. The decision was emotionally difficult but strategically unavoidable. American soldiers needed access to enhancement options that could level the playing field against enemies equipped with weaponized versions of his prosthetic innovations. The enhancement systems developed for American forces incorporated safety features and ethical safeguards that distinguished them fundamentally from the disposable soldier programs being implemented by hostile nations. All enhancements were voluntary and reversible, with extensive counseling and support systems that helped soldiers understand the implications of augmentation procedures. Medical monitoring ensured that enhancement technologies didn't compromise long-term health, while psychological support addressed the emotional challenges of integrating artificial limbs into personal identity. Most importantly, American enhancement programs maintained focus on defensive and protective applications rather than purely aggressive capabilities. Enhanced soldiers were trained for missions that required capabilities beyond normal human limitations, but their artificial limbs incorporated built-in constraints that prevented use as weapons against civilian populations. The enhancement technology was designed to protect innocent people rather than threaten them, reflecting the humanitarian principles that had motivated Diego's original prosthetic research. Tyler's involvement in the military program had evolved from consultant to active participant as he approached his 18th birthday, and began considering career options that would allow him to contribute directly to prosthetic technology development. His experience as a long-term user of neural interface prosthetics had given him insights that proved invaluable in designing enhancement systems that prioritized operator comfort and effectiveness. His natural leadership abilities and communication skills made him an effective advocate for soldier welfare concerns that might otherwise be overlooked in military development programs. The transformation of Tyler from prosthetic user to technology developer represented the fulfillment of dreams that had seemed impossible when he first walked into Diego's auto shop as an 8-year-old child. His academic achievements had earned him early admission to prestigious engineering programs, while his advocacy work had established him as a recognized voice in discussions of assistive technology policy and medical ethics. The prosthetic technology that had given him opportunities to pursue any career he chose had led him to choose a path that would help provide similar opportunities to others. Diego's role in the expanding enhancement programs had grown to include oversight of civilian applications that ensured military research contributed to beneficial medical developments rather than existing solely for defensive purposes. Every advancement in military enhancement technology was evaluated for potential prosthetic applications that could help injured veterans and civilians with disabilities. The research pipeline flowed both directions, with medical innovations informing military development, while defensive technologies contributed to improved civilian prosthetics. The global impact of American enhancement programs extended far beyond military applications to influence international policies governing human augmentation and the ethical boundaries of technological modification. The safety protocols and reversibility features that Diego had insisted upon became international standards that distinguished legitimate enhancement research from the problematic programs being implemented by hostile nations. International monitoring organizations used American enhancement programs as examples of how augmentation technology could be developed responsibly while maintaining respect for human dignity and individual choice. The contrast between American approaches that prioritized soldier welfare and hostile programs that treated enhanced personnel as expendable assets became a significant factor in diplomatic efforts to establish international regulations governing military enhancement technology. The educational initiatives that had grown out of Diego's community workshop had evolved into formal academic programs that prepared students for careers in prosthetic technology and human enhancement research. Universities across the country established degree programs that combined engineering expertise with ethical reasoning, ensuring that future researchers would approach augmentation technology with the humanitarian perspectives that had characterized Diego's original work. Tyler's participation in these educational programs as both student and instructor demonstrated how individuals with direct experience using enhancement technology could contribute unique insights to academic research and policy development. His presentations at international conferences had influenced prosthetic development programs in dozens of countries, while his advocacy for user-centered design principles had changed how researchers approached the challenge of creating artificial limbs that truly served human needs. The manufacturing and distribution networks that had grown out of Diego's foundation had become a global infrastructure for providing advanced prosthetics to families who couldn't afford commercial devices. Automated production facilities in multiple countries could produce custom prosthetics based on detailed body scans transmitted securely over internet connections, while local technicians trained in maintenance and fitting procedures provided ongoing support for users in remote regions. The economic impact of these programs extended beyond individual families to influence regional development patterns in areas where prosthetic manufacturing had created employment opportunities and technical expertise that attracted other medical technology companies. Communities that had previously been isolated from advanced manufacturing were becoming centers for innovation in assistive technology, while local populations were developing skills that connected them to global technology markets. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact of Diego's work was its influence on how society approached the relationship between human potential and technological enhancement. The success of Tyler's prosthetic and the thousands of similar devices that had followed demonstrated that artificial systems could extend human capabilities without compromising human identity or replacing human judgment. Enhancement technology was most beneficial when it served human goals rather than substituting technological solutions for human wisdom. The military applications that had seemed so threatening when foreign nations first began weaponizing Diego's innovations had ultimately strengthened rather than undermined the humanitarian principles that had motivated his original research. The need to develop defensive technologies had accelerated prosthetic research and created funding streams that supported beneficial applications far beyond what civilian medical markets could have sustained independently. The contrast between American enhancement programs that prioritize soldier welfare and hostile applications that treated enhanced personnel as disposable assets had become a powerful demonstration of how technological capabilities could serve different values depending on the ethical frameworks that guided their development. The same neural interface technology that enabled Tyler to control his prosthetic through thought could be used to create expendable super soldiers, or to restore functional independence to injured veterans, depending on the moral principles that shaped research priorities. Diego's reflection on the journey that had brought him from neighborhood mechanic to director of international enhancement research always returned to the fundamental insight that had motivated his decision to help Tyler. Technology was only as valuable as its ability to serve human needs and expand human possibilities. The neural interfaces, automated manufacturing systems, and global distribution networks were impressive achievements, but their ultimate significance lay in their contribution to human flourishing rather than their technical sophistication. The relationship between Diego and Tyler had evolved from mechanic and customer to colleagues and collaborators whose partnership continued to drive innovation in prosthetic technology and enhancement research. Their friendship demonstrated that the most effective technological development emerged from genuine human relationships and deep understanding of user needs, rather than abstract research programs that prioritized technical capabilities over practical applications. The community that had formed around Diego's original auto shop had become a model for how technological innovation could emerge from unexpected places when creativity was combined with compassion and commitment to serving others. The children who had grown up watching Diego work on Tyler's prosthetic were now adults pursuing careers in engineering, medicine, and policy development, carrying forward the lesson that technology was most powerful when it was designed to help people, rather than simply demonstrate technical possibilities. The global network of researchers, manufacturers, and users that had grown out of Tyler's story continued to expand through connections that transcended national boundaries and cultural differences. Children in different countries who were learning to use neural interface prosthetics shared experiences and suggestions through online platforms that connected young users across geographic and linguistic barriers, while engineers in various facilities collaborated on improvements that emerged from diverse user populations and environmental conditions. The educational impact of Diego's work had extended into formal academic curricula at every level, from elementary school science programs that used prosthetic technology to demonstrate engineering principles to graduate research programs that investigated the intersection of human enhancement and social responsibility. The story of Tyler's prosthetic had become a standard case study that illustrated how technological innovation could emerge from community needs and individual compassion, rather than institutional research programs or market forces. The policy implications of Diego's approach to enhancement technology had influenced government regulations and international agreements that established ethical standards for human augmentation research. The safety protocols and reversibility requirements that he had pioneered became international benchmarks that distinguished legitimate enhancement programs from experimental efforts that prioritized technical advancement over human welfare. The success of American enhancement programs in maintaining technological parity with hostile nations while preserving humanitarian principles had demonstrated that ethical constraints could strengthen rather than weaken technological development. The safety features and user-centered design principles that Diego had insisted upon had produced enhancement systems that were more reliable, more effective, and more acceptable to military personnel than the aggressive augmentation programs being implemented by countries that disregarded ethical considerations. The veteran support programs that had grown out of military enhancement research provided comprehensive services for soldiers who had received artificial limbs during their military service and needed assistance transitioning to civilian life. Unlike the disposable soldier programs implemented by hostile nations, American enhancement technology was designed to benefit users throughout their lives rather than simply during their military service periods. The medical advances that had emerged from military enhancement research continued to improve civilian prosthetic technology in ways that benefited thousands of families around the world. Neural interface systems that had been developed for military applications were adapted for children like Tyler, who needed sophisticated control capabilities, while materials and manufacturing processes designed for military durability improved the reliability and longevity of civilian prosthetic devices. The international cooperation that had developed around prosthetic technology sharing had created diplomatic relationships that extended far beyond medical applications to influence broader patterns of technological collaboration and information exchange. Countries that had initially been suspicious of American enhancement programs had become partners in research efforts that served humanitarian goals while addressing legitimate security concerns about human augmentation technology. Tyler's transition from prosthetic user to technology developer had been accompanied by personal growth that demonstrated how enhancement technology could support rather than replace human development. His prosthetic had provided him with capabilities that allowed him to pursue any career he chose, but his decision to focus on helping others reflected values and aspirations that came from human experience rather than technological enhancement. The wedding that took place in Diego's community workshop on a warm Saturday afternoon in late spring brought together individuals whose lives had been touched by Tyler's story in ways that illustrated the far-reaching impact of technological innovation guided by humanitarian principles. Tyler and his longtime girlfriend Maria Santos, Miguel's daughter who had been among the first children to discover Diego's robotics workshop, exchanged vows surrounded by prosthetic users, military veterans, engineers, and community members whose connections to each other had grown out of shared commitment to using technology for human benefit. The ceremony itself reflected the values that had guided Diego's approach to enhancement technology from the beginning: celebration of human potential, recognition of individual choice and dignity, and commitment to supporting others in pursuing their dreams regardless of physical limitations or economic circumstances. Tyler's neural interface prosthetic was decorated with flowers for the occasion, transforming a sophisticated technological device into a symbol of hope and possibility that had brought two families together through shared experiences of overcoming challenges with creativity and community support. Diego's speech at the reception focused not on the technical achievements that had brought them together, but on the human relationships that had made those achievements meaningful. The prosthetic technology that had begun with a simple desire to help one child had grown into a global movement that had improved thousands of lives. But its ultimate significance lay in the demonstration that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they combined technical skills with compassion and determination to serve others. The future that stretched ahead for Tyler, Maria, and the countless other young people who had been inspired by their story was filled with possibilities that had been unimaginable when Tyler first walked into Diego's auto shop as a shy 8-year-old child. Enhancement technology would continue to advance, opening new opportunities for individuals with disabilities while raising new questions about the relationship between human identity and technological capability. But the foundation that had been established through Diego's commitment to humanitarian principles and user-centered design would continue to guide development of enhancement technology in directions that served human flourishing rather than simply demonstrating technical possibilities. The lesson that had emerged from Tyler's story would continue to influence how society approached the intersection of technology and human potential. Innovation was most powerful when it grew out of genuine understanding of human needs and commitment to expanding opportunities for all people to pursue their dreams. The auto shop where it all began remained open, still serving neighborhood customers who depended on affordable repair services while also functioning as a community center where local children could explore engineering concepts and discover that technology could be a tool for positive change. Diego continued to work on cars during the day and prosthetic innovations in the evening, maintaining the balance between practical service and visionary research that had characterized his approach from the beginning. The story that had started with a simple act of kindness between a mechanic and a child had become proof that technological innovation was most beneficial when it emerged from human relationships and remained grounded in commitment to serving others. Tyler's prosthetic had grown from a weekend project into a global movement that was transforming how society understood the possibilities for human enhancement, but the heart of the story remained the relationship between two people who had discovered together that limitations could be transformed into opportunities through creativity, persistence, and love. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.